I woke up to the rhythmic beeping of machines, the sterile smell of antiseptic burning my nostrils. The private hospital room was dimmed, just past 2 a.m., according to the wall clock. That's when I saw him, Carlos, the night nurse, standing by my IV line with a syringe in his gloved hand. But he wasn't injecting anything. He was removing something. He leaned close, his voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Morrison, I need you to stay calm. Your son's private doctor has been adding something to your IV. Something that's not in your chart." My heart should have raced, but I'd felt so weak these past 5 days that even shock came slowly. I stared at Carlos, this young man I'd known for less than a week, wondering if the medication was making me paranoid. But his dark eyes were steady, serious. "Show me," I managed to croak. He held up a small vial he'd pulled from his pocket. Clear liquid, no label. "I caught Dr. Hayes adding this to your saline drip during her visit this evening. She thought everyone had left the floor. I was in the supply closet. Dr. Patricia Hayes, the concierge physician my son Michael had insisted on hiring when I first got sick. Only the best for you, Dad," he'd said with that concerned smile. The same smile he'd worn at my retirement party 3 months ago when I announced I'd sold Morrison Logistics for $85 million. Let me back up. 3 months ago, I was the healthiest 68-year-old you'd ever meet. Golf twice a week, sailing on weekends, already planning a trip around the world. I'd built Morrison Logistics from a single delivery truck in 1985 into the East Coast's premier cold chain shipping company. 3,000 employees, fleet of 200 climate-controlled vehicles, contracts with every major pharmaceutical company, from Maine to Florida. The sale had been in the works for 2 years. A private equity firm out of New York, clean deal, all cash, $85 million. After taxes and paying off the remaining debt, I'd walk away with $62 million, more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I'd called Michael immediately after signing the papers. He was my only child, after all. His mother, Rebecca, had passed away from breast cancer when he was just 15. I'd raised him alone, put him through MIT, watched him graduate with honors in computer science. He'd started 3 tech companies, each one failing a little more spectacularly than the last. But he was my son. I believed in him. "That's incredible, Dad," he'd said when I told him about the sale. "We should celebrate. Big dinner, just family. Bring Jessica." Jessica, his wife of 5 years, 38 years old, former marketing executive at a cosmetics company, now a lifestyle influencer with 40,000 Instagram followers, who posted pictures of herself in designer clothes at expensive restaurants. I'd never warmed to her, but I kept my mouth shut. Michael seemed happy, and that's what mattered. The celebration dinner was at Ostra, this high-end seafood place in Boston's Back Bay. Michael and Jessica arrived in a new Mercedes G-Wagon. I didn't comment, though I knew Michael's latest startup had just folded, and he'd mentioned being temporarily tight on cash when I'd offered to loan him money 6 months earlier. Jessica had been especially affectionate that night, kissing my cheek, calling me Dad for the first time ever, talking about how we were really family now. She'd ordered the most expensive wine, the caviar service, the whole 9 yards. "You deserve this, Robert," she'd said, raising her glass. "All those years of hard work. Now you can finally relax." 2 weeks later, I started feeling off, tired, nauseous, dizzy spells. My regular doctor, Dr. Chen, ran standard tests. Everything came back normal. "Probably just stress from the transition," he said. "Retirement can be harder on the body than people think." But it got worse. I couldn't keep food down. My hands trembled. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with terrible stomach cramps. That's when Michael suggested Dr. Hayes. "She's a concierge physician," he explained. "Very exclusive. She used to work at Mass General. Now she only takes private clients. She can come to your house, run tests there. Much more comfortable than going to the hospital every other day." I was too sick to argue. Dr. Hayes arrived at my Cape Cod estate the next morning. All smiles and efficiency. She was maybe 55, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, expensive suit, carrying a medical bag that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She ran tests, drew blood, listened to my symptoms with concerned frowns. "I think we're looking at a severe gastrointestinal infection," she announced, "possibly picked up from contaminated seafood. These things can be tricky. I'd like to start you on an aggressive antibiotic regimen, but given your symptoms, I think hospital monitoring would be prudent. Just for a few days." Michael had already arranged everything. A private room at Boston Medical Center, one of their VIP suites that looked more like a Four Seasons hotel than a hospital. Hayes would oversee my care personally. He'd stay at my house to take care of things while I recovered. That was 5 days ago. 5 days of feeling worse, despite the treatments. 5 days of Dr. Hayes visiting twice daily, always with Michael. Always adjusting something in my IV line. 5 days of Jessica sending flowers and calling to check on me, her voice dripping with false concern. And now Carlos, this night nurse I barely knew, was telling me they were poisoning me. "We need to test this," I said, pointing at the vial. "Already sent a sample to a friend in toxicology," Carlos replied. "Off the books. Should have results by morning." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Mr. Morrison, I've been a nurse for 8 years. I've seen a lot of things. And your symptoms? They're consistent with heavy metal poisoning. Arsenic, specifically. Small doses, over time." The word hung in the air between us like a blade. "Arsenic. Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "You could lose your license, going around the chain of command." Carlos sat down in the chair beside my bed. "My mom died when I was 16. Ovarian cancer. She didn't have good insurance. Couldn't afford the treatments she needed. But there was this nurse, Mrs. Patterson, who fought for her, got her into clinical trials, advocated for better pain management, sat with her when I couldn't be there because I was in school." His eyes met mine. "Mrs. Patterson told me that being a nurse isn't just about following orders. It's about protecting patients when they can't protect themselves. So, if I see something wrong, I speak up. I don't care about the paperwork." I believed him. In that moment, looking at this young man who'd risked his career to warn me, I believed every word. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the fact that his story about his mother reminded me of watching Rebecca die, feeling helpless. Or maybe it was just that somewhere deep down, I'd already known something was wrong. "Tell me what to do," I said. Carlos pulled out his phone. "First, we document everything. I'm going to take photos of every medication Dr. Hayes has prescribed, every adjustment she's made to your chart. Second, you need to act normal. If they suspect you know, they might panic, change tactics. Third, we need real evidence, not just suspicions. How do we get that? Your son has power of attorney over your medical decisions, right?" I nodded. I'd signed those papers 2 years ago, when I started planning the sale of the company, part of a comprehensive estate planning package my lawyer had recommended. Standard stuff. If I became incapacitated, Michael would make decisions for me. "That means he can authorize any treatment," Carlos continued, "including experimental ones, high-risk ones. Dr. Hayes has been documenting complications in your chart, resistance to antibiotics, unusual reactions. She's building a case for why you're deteriorating despite aggressive treatment. Building toward what? I think she's setting up a scenario where you go into organ failure. Kidneys first, probably. Then she recommends some last-ditch treatment that doesn't work, and you die from what looks like natural causes brought on by the initial infection. Your son, as your loving heir, authorizes everything. No one questions it because Dr. Hayes is a respected physician, and he's following her recommendations. The coldness in my chest had nothing to do with the IV fluids. My own son, planning to murder me for money, except I wasn't completely sure it was Michael's plan. "Not yet. I need to make a call," I told Carlos. "Is there a phone in here that's not monitored?" He handed me his personal cell. "Who are you calling?" "Someone who's very good at finding out the truth." I dialed Martin Breslow, my former general counsel at Morrison Logistics. Martin had been with me for 20 years. handled everything from union negotiations to FDA compliance issues when we'd had that temperature control failure in 2015. More importantly, he was a pit bull who didn't let go once he smelled blood. It was almost 3 in the morning. But Martin answered on the second ring. That was Martin, always available, always sharp. Robert, are you all right? Michael said you were in the hospital. Martin, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not ask questions until it's done. Can you do that? A pause. Then, what do you need? Run a complete financial background on Jessica Morrison. Bank accounts, credit cards, debts, assets, everything. I also need you to look into Dr. Patricia Hayes, medical license, malpractice history, financial connections. And Martin, do it quietly. I don't want Michael knowing. Robert, what's going on? Just trust me. How fast can you get me information? If I call in some favors? 48 hours. Less if I don't sleep. Make it less. And Martin, one more thing. I need you to recommend a criminal defense attorney. Someone who handles white-collar crime. Maybe has connections to the DA's office. Another pause. Longer this time. Jesus. Robert. Okay. I know someone. Sarah Chen, former federal prosecutor, now in private practice. I'll brief her myself. She's discreet. Thank you, Martin. I hung up and handed the phone back to Carlos. Acting normal when you suspect your own child is trying to kill you turns out to be harder than it sounds. Michael visited the next morning, right at 9 a.m., carrying coffee from my favorite shop and a box of pastries I couldn't eat because my stomach was still a wreck. Hey, Dad, he said, settling into the chair with that same concerned smile. Dr. Hayes says you had a rough night. They're thinking of switching your antibiotics again. I watched him carefully, really looked at him for the first time in maybe years. When had Michael gotten so thin? There were dark circles under his eyes, new lines around his mouth. His clothes were expensive, designer labels, but they hung on him like he'd lost weight recently. Stress. Probably. Financial stress. How's the house? I asked, keeping my voice weak, playing the sick father. Fine, fine. I've been going through some of your papers, making sure all the utilities are paid, that kind of thing. Hope you don't mind. Of course not, but something cold settled in my stomach. My papers. My financial documents. He was looking for something. Dr. Hayes swept in at 9:30, all professional warmth. She examined me, frowned at my charts, made notes on her iPad. The infection is proving resistant, she announced. I'm going to try a stronger antibiotic cocktail, but I have to be honest with you, Robert. If we don't see improvement in the next 48 hours, we may need to consider more aggressive interventions. What kind of interventions? Michael asked, right on cue. Possibly dialysis if his kidney function continues to decline. We're monitoring his blood work closely. I watched Michael's face. Was that fear I saw? Or anticipation? After they left, Carlos came in to change my IV bag. He palmed me a small note. Tox results back. Arsenic confirmed. Levels dangerous but not immediately fatal. Long-term exposure pattern. I closed my eyes. Processing. Long-term exposure. That meant this had been going on for weeks. Maybe months. Since before I even got sick enough to see Dr. Hayes. My phone buzzed. A text from Martin. Call me from secure line. Carlos let me use his phone again. Martin didn't waste time with pleasantries. Robert, your daughter-in-law is in serious financial trouble. She's got 8 maxed-out credit cards totaling about $300,000. Most of it luxury purchases, designer clothes, jewelry, a lease on that Mercedes. She's also been wiring money to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Small amounts, 5 to 10,000 at a time, but it adds up to almost $500,000 over the past 2 years. Jesus. Does Michael know? That's the interesting part. Michael's company didn't just fold. It went bankrupt, owing investors almost $8 million. There's a lawsuit pending, but here's what's strange. Jessica started opening those credit cards right after Michael's first startup failed, 4 years ago. She's been maintaining this lifestyle on borrowed money the entire time you've known her. What about Dr. Hayes? Dr. Patricia Hayes was asked to leave Mass General 3 years ago. It was kept quiet, settled internally. But I found someone who talked. I can see. I hard. She was accused of overprescribing pain medication to wealthy patients, essentially running a pill mill for people who could afford her concierge fees. No criminal charges. But she lost her hospital privileges. She's been operating a private practice since then. Very exclusive, very expensive. And her connection to Michael? Working on that. But Robert? Sarah Chen wants to talk to you. I told her the basics. She thinks you need to involve law enforcement now. Before this goes any further, I thought about Carlos's toxicology results, about Jessica's debts, about Dr. Hayes' shady history, about Michael's failed companies and desperate financial situation. The pieces were coming together, but I still didn't have the full picture. Not yet, I said. I need to know if Michael is a willing participant or a pawn, if Jessica is manipulating him, or if they're in this together. Robert, someone is poisoning you. Every day you wait. I know. But he's my son, Martin. I need to know the truth. Give me 3 more days. Can Sarah Chen wait that long? I won. A heavy sigh. I'll ask her. But Robert, be careful. Money makes people do terrible things. Even to family. Especially to family. That afternoon, Jessica visited. Alone. That was unusual. She was dressed in head-to-toe Chanel, her nails freshly manicured, carrying a handbag that probably cost more than Carlos made in 3 months. Robert, she cooed, leaning down to kiss my forehead. You look terrible. I'm so worried about you. Where's Michael? I asked. Oh, he had some business to handle. Potential investors for his new venture. You know how it is. She settled into the chair, crossing her legs. Actually, I wanted to talk to you privately. About Michael. This was unexpected. What about him? She leaned forward, lowering her voice like we were conspirators. He's under so much pressure, Robert. The bankruptcy. The lawsuits. Trying to start fresh. He's not sleeping. Barely eating. I'm worried about his health. A delicate pause. And I'm worried about what will happen to us if something happens to you before his new company gets off the ground. There it was. The real reason for the visit. She was testing the waters, seeing if I'd caught on. I've taken care of Michael in my will, I said carefully. He inherits everything. The house, the investment accounts, all of it. Her eyes lit up just a fraction. Got you, I thought. That's so generous of you. But Robert, these things can take months to sort out. Probate, estate taxes, all those legal complications. And Michael needs help now. I was thinking, maybe you could consider a gift? Just enough to get him back on his feet? $1 million or 2? $1 million or 2, said so casually, like she was asking to borrow $20. I'll think about it, I told her, watching her face carefully. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course. Take your time. Well, I should let you rest. Michael will be by this evening with Dr. Hayes for your next treatment. After she left, I felt sick in a way that had nothing to do with the poison. This woman, this stranger my son had married, was actively pushing to accelerate my death. And Michael, was he a knowing participant or just a desperate man being manipulated by a sociopath? I was about to find out. Carlos came in at 6 p.m., right before the evening shift change. Your son and Dr. Hayes are here, he said quietly. And I've set up a small camera in your room. If they do anything to your IV, we'll have it recorded. Your lawyer friend is in the waiting room with someone from the DA's office. They're ready to move if we get evidence. You called them, Mr. Morrison? With all due respect, I'm not letting you die to prove a point. If they try to up the dose tonight, we're intervening. I nodded. He was right. This had to end. Michael and Dr. Hayes arrived at 6:15. Michael looked exhausted, his hands shaking slightly as he set down the coffee carrier he'd brought. Dr. Hayes was her usual composed self, checking my vitals with practiced efficiency. "Robert, I'm not going to sugarcoat this," she said. "Your kidney function is declining faster than I'd like. It's aggressive, and there are risks, but at this point, we need to be aggressive." "What kind of risks?" I asked. "In rare cases, it can cause cardiac arrest. But given your current trajectory, the benefits outweigh the risks. Michael, as his power of attorney, I need your consent." I watched my son's face. This was the moment. Would he sign his father's death warrant? Michael's hand trembled as he reached for the tablet. Dr. Hayes offered him. He stared at the consent form for a long moment. Then his eyes met mine, and I saw something there. Fear. Yes. Desperation. Absolutely. But also guilt. Deep, crushing guilt. He started, then stopped. His hand was still shaking. "Michael," Dr. Hayes prompted, her voice sharp. "We need to move quickly." That's when Michael broke. He dropped the tablet, buried his face in his hands, and started sobbing. "I can't do this. Dad, I'm so sorry. I can't do this." Dr. Hayes's expression flickered, just for a second, from professional concern to something cold and calculating. "Michael, your father's life depends on this treatment." "Stop lying!" Michael shouted, startling both of us. "Just stop. I know what you've been doing. I know what Jessica asked you to do, and I've been too weak and too scared to stop it. But I can't. I can't let you kill him." The room went very still. Dr. Hayes recovered quickly. "Michael, you're obviously under stress. Perhaps we should discuss this outside." "You've been poisoning him," Michael said, his voice breaking. "Jessica paid you to poison my father slowly so it would look like natural causes. And I knew. I've known for 2 weeks. And I didn't stop it because I'm drowning in debt, and I'm pathetic. And I thought maybe if it just happened, I could pretend I didn't know." He turned to me, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. I never asked for this. Jessica said it was the only way to save us, that you were old anyway, that you'd want me to be happy. But you're my father, and I was going to let you die, and I hate myself, and I'm so sorry." Before I could respond, the door burst open. Carlos, followed by Martin, Sarah Chen, and 2 uniformed police officers. "Dr. Patricia Hayes," Sarah Chen said, holding up her badge. "I'm with the district attorney's office. You're under arrest for attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent." The rest happened fast. Dr. Hayes tried to run, actually pushed past one of the officers, but they caught her in the hallway. They found the vial of arsenic in her medical bag, along with detailed notes about dosages and timing. Her phone had text messages from Jessica, dozens of them, discussing payment schedules and updates on my condition. Jessica was arrested at our Cape Cod house, literally in the middle of packing designer clothes into Louis Vuitton luggage. She'd been planning to run, taking what she could liquidate before everything fell apart. Michael cooperated fully with the investigation, turned over emails, text messages, recorded phone calls. It came out that Jessica had planned the whole thing. Recruited Dr. Hayes through some shady connection from her cosmetics company days when Hayes was running her pill mill. Michael had found out 2 weeks ago when he overheard a phone call between Jessica and Dr. Hayes. He'd been paralyzed by fear and debt and shame, going along with it, even though it made him sick, until that final moment when he couldn't sign the consent form that would have killed me. The DA offered Michael a deal. Full cooperation, testimony against Jessica and Dr. Hayes, in exchange for immunity from prosecution. The argument was that he hadn't actively participated in the poisoning, and his last-minute confession had prevented my murder. Sarah Chen fought hard for him, painted him as another one of Jessica's victims, a weak man manipulated by a sociopathic wife. I sat through the entire preliminary hearing, watching my son on the witness stand, listening to him describe how Jessica had systematically destroyed his businesses, run up massive debts in his name, isolated him from friends, and then convinced him that killing his father was the only solution. How she'd found Dr. Hayes, negotiated the price tag of $1 million plus a percentage of the inheritance, started the poisoning while I was still healthy, so it would look like a gradual illness. The judge granted Michael immunity. The federal prosecutor was more interested in Jessica and Dr. Hayes anyway. Those two were the real criminals. As for me, 3 weeks in a specialized detox facility cleared most of the arsenic from my system. The doctors said I was lucky. Another month of exposure, and I would have suffered permanent organ damage, maybe death. As it was, I'd lost 20 pounds, had some minor kidney issues, and would need monitoring for the next few years. Carlos visited me every few days during recovery. We'd become friends, bonded by the whole terrible experience. I asked him what he wanted to do with his life, and he admitted he'd always wanted to get his nurse practitioner degree but couldn't afford it. The certification programs ran about $80,000, and he was still paying off his bachelor's degree loans. I wrote him a check for $200,000. Enough for the degree, living expenses, and to clear his existing debt. He tried to refuse, but I wouldn't let him. "You saved my life," I told him. "You risked your career, maybe your safety, to protect a patient you barely knew. That's not something I can repay with money, but I can at least make sure you don't have to worry about student loans while you're studying," he cried. This tough young nurse who'd stood up to doctors and police and criminals cried in my hospital room and thanked me about 20 times. I also set up a scholarship fund in his mother's name, Mrs. Patterson Memorial Nursing Scholarship, $500,000 to help nursing students from low-income backgrounds. Carlos helped me design the application criteria. Michael was a harder situation. He moved out of my house, divorced Jessica while she was awaiting trial, started going to therapy 3 times a week. He wrote me letters, long detailed letters about his failures and regrets, and the things Jessica had done to manipulate him over the years, about how she'd love-bombed him at the start, then gradually isolated him from friends, made him financially dependent on her family money, then cut that off and blamed him when he couldn't maintain her lifestyle. I read every letter, thought long and hard about what it meant to be a father, about enabling versus supporting, about forgiveness versus stupidity. 6 months after Jessica and Dr. Hayes were sentenced, Jessica got 25 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. Dr. Hayes got 18 for attempted murder and illegal prescription practices. I agreed to meet with Michael. We met at a coffee shop in Cambridge, neutral territory. He looked better, healthier. He'd gained back some weight, cut his hair, wore simple clothes instead of the designer labels Jessica had insisted on. "Dad," he started, but I held up my hand. "Let me talk first," I said. "I've thought about this a lot. What you did, Michael, failing to stop a murder, that's unforgivable. You're my son, and I love you. But I can't pretend that what you did was okay just because you were scared or manipulated." He nodded, tears already forming. "But," I continued, "I also know that Jessica was a master manipulator. I saw the evidence, the psychological evaluations. She targeted you specifically because you were vulnerable after your business failures. She exploited your weaknesses, your fears, your relationship with me. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it explains it." "I should have been stronger," he whispered. "Yes, you should have. But you weren't, and now we have to deal with that reality. So, here's what I'm proposing. I'm not writing you out of my will, but I'm also not leaving you millions of dollars to potentially waste or let another Jessica get her hands on. Instead, I'm setting up a trust. You'll get a modest living allowance, enough to cover a reasonable apartment, food, basic expenses. If you want more, you'll have to earn it. I understand. I'm also requiring that you continue therapy for at least 5 more years. Professional help, Michael. You need to figure out why you were so easy to manipulate, why you valued money over integrity, why you almost let your father die." He was crying openly now. I don't deserve your help. No, you don't. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I believe people can change, and because despite everything, you're still my son. But Michael, this is your last chance. If you screw this up, if you fall back into old patterns, if you ever do anything like this again, we're done. Forever. Do you understand? Yes, sir. We didn't hug. We didn't have some tearful reunion. But we shook hands, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Determination. Real, genuine determination to be better. That was 2 years ago. Jessica is in federal prison. Dr. Hayes is in a different facility. They'll both be old women by the time they get out, if they survive that long. Michael finished his therapy, started working as a project manager at a small software company. Nothing glamorous, decent salary, honest work. He lives in a modest apartment in Somerville, drives a used Honda, dates occasionally but nothing serious. We have dinner once a month, always somewhere casual, always Dutch treat because I want him to know he has to pay his own way now. He's not the son I hoped he'd be, but he's the son he is, and I'm learning to accept that. Carlos finished his nurse practitioner program with top honors. He's working at Boston Medical Center now, specializing in elder care, advocating for patients who can't advocate for themselves. We still grab coffee every few weeks. He brings his girlfriend sometimes, a pediatric oncology nurse named Maria, who's as tough and principled as he is. As for me, I did eventually take that trip around the world, spent 3 months traveling to every continent, saw things I'd dreamed about for years. I came home healthier and more at peace than I'd been in decades. I also became a lot more careful about who I trust. Started doing thorough background checks on anyone who gets close to me. Maybe that's cynical, but nearly being murdered by your own family will do that to you. The truth is, I don't regret selling my company. I don't regret the money. What I regret is not seeing the signs earlier, not recognizing that Jessica was dangerous, that Michael was weak, that blind trust in family can be just as fatal as blind trust in strangers. But I'm grateful too. Grateful for Carlos, who could have looked the other way but didn't. Grateful for Martin and Sarah Chen, who moved heaven and earth to build a case in 48 hours. Grateful for the justice system that actually worked, for once. And grateful to be alive, sitting here in my study overlooking Cape Cod Bay, telling you this story. Because life is precious, even when the people who should treasure it the most are the ones trying to take it away. I kept the vial, the one Carlos pulled from Dr. Hayes's bag that first night. It sits on my desk in a small glass case. A reminder. Not of betrayal. Exactly. Though there's that too. But a reminder that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places. Sometimes the stranger cares more than family. Sometimes doing the right thing means risking everything. And sometimes, when you're lying in a hospital bed at 2 a.m., half poisoned and losing hope, a young nurse you barely know will lean in and whisper the words that save your life. I need you to stay calm. Your son's doctor is poisoning you. That's the story. That's what happened. And if you're out there listening, maybe thinking about your own family, your own trusts and wills and who you've given power over your life, let me give you one piece of advice. Trust, but verify. Love your family, but don't be blind. And if someone seems too interested in your death, they probably are. Stay safe out there.